Welcome to the In Her Financial Shoes podcast with me, Catherine Morgan, the podcast that helps you step into wealth. Deserve it, create it, grow it.
Money profit specifically is not an event, it's a habit. Profit is an accumulation of small little wins that happen every day, every hour, not that just magically fall into your lap. So we need to put the habit in place today.
Like, this isn't the life that I want to live. Like, this is not the path that I want to take. I want to be the master of my ship. I want to control my own destiny.
Who were you before you were their partner, their mother, their colleague, their father?
I'm passionate about helping you to feel confident to transform your relationship with money and take that next step. The question is, are you ready to be that wealthy woman? And remember, it's not about the money. Small steps, big wins. Let's go. Hey guys, and welcome back to another live episode on the In Her Financial Shoes podcast. How are you all doing? This is the first time I've live streamed for this year, 2022. That seems crazy to even say out loud. So let me know as you're joining, if you're listening to this podcast episode live on our social media channels right now. Give me a little hey in the comments. Let me know how your Christmas and New Year has been, and let me know what some of your intentions are for 2022. I'm really curious to hear a little bit more about what intentions are you stepping into to make 2022 your best financial year yet. Now, for those of you that have been listening to the podcast recently, we've been throwing out some like mini series episodes for you. So I hope you've been enjoying those. The one we're in at the moment is talking around how to have your best financial year yet. And today I wanted to talk about a conversation around investing, but also about some of the emotional baggage that comes up when we start to think about investing. Two of the biggest emotions, fear and greed, because I'm really curious about investing, right? Because many of us don't even believe that it's possible for us to be investing. Like, wealth just isn't normalized for women. We're so used to seeing men bringing money into the household that it doesn't become familiar or normal for women to be investing. And investing is such an important conversation for us to be having, particularly for this year. You know, if you want to grow wealth, we don't just need to be talking about paying off debts, growing our income, growing our profits and our savings balances, but also how we can start investing. But I find that this conversation for many people gets complicated and overwhelming. And so I wanted to bring somebody onto the podcast today who is a investment like guru. I've just been on his podcast actually shortly before coming live here. And that guest is the wonderful Jeremy Newson, who I'm going to introduce you to in a second. And he's very much on a mission to enrich people's lives with mentally liberating education. Like, I just love that phrase, mentally liberating education. And what I'm really curious to get stuck into with Jeremy today is his story when, from the age of 7, he's been completely fascinated with investing. And his father actually matched his investment deposit for buying some Apple stock back in 1995, which today would be worth $14 million. Oh my God, I want to hear this story from Jeremy. And his passion for helping others enrich their lives through investing led him to found an organization called Real Life Trading in 2014. And he's now the host of an incredible podcast, which is From Broke to Woke. So let's bring Jeremy onto the show today. Hey, Jeremy.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Amazing and exceptional. So thrilled to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having us. So Jeremy, tell us a little bit first of all, about your podcast. Tell us a little bit about that. How do you use your podcast to get your mission out to the world around investing?
Appreciate that question. The Broke to Woke podcast is where myself and Brittany Turner, who is another voice for women, she was and is an extremely prolific and prosperous real estate developer. She lives also in Nashville, Tennessee, and our lives crossed through an event that I had, like a live speaking public engagement event. Her and I sat down and we share our stories on how we went specifically from extremely poor to what most would consider relatively financially independent, and having the opportunity to make those massive transitions mentally, but also physically, right? What buttons do we have to press? Who did we have to call? What steps do we have to take to really elevate our finances? And we go through the whole story in really fun, easy to listen to 20-minute segments.
So I've got to ask you then, Jeremy, what's your story then of going from broke to woke?
It's a long one, but all in all, my elevator pitch I tell for most people is I grew up in a single wide trailer treehouse. I escaped a cult at the age of 24. I became a liquid millionaire in my late 20s. I lost it all 3 separate times with 3 separate tragic incidences. And present day, I teach current and future world leaders how the stock market and crypto markets can elevate their countries and communities. So that's like the elevator pitch, but the little bit more in-depth version, I grew up in a small city in the state of Georgia here in the United States of America, and extremely impoverished. You know, a lot of people use the term adjunct poverty. So there's a very popular term that people are familiar with, dirt poor, which means you have dirt floors, right? All of your clothes are covered in dirt. I was dirt poor, very, very poor, but I was extremely happy. And we watched a movie that changed my life, and that's the one that you talked about a little bit, was the movie Forrest Gump. And I'm sure most of your listeners have heard that or watched that movie. If you haven't,
Such a
like,
good film.
such a great movie. Got to check it out. But about 80% of the way through the movie, Forrest talks about him and Dan, Lieutenant Dan, invested into a fruit company, and they no longer had to worry about money anymore. That was the first time I had a belief that someone could not have to worry about money anymore. That was a paradigm shift for me. I'd never heard that phrase ever. And when I heard it, I asked my dad, what's investing and what is this fruit company? So he told me all about Apple computers, and he told me about how, the stock market works. And I was just so enthralled by his information. I asked him, I begged him, let's buy some shares of Apple. Well, as I told you, we didn't have much money. And he was like, son, this is a movie. All right. This is pure fiction. Investing doesn't happen that way. This is not the way to do it. This is just a film. And I just couldn't see how it wasn't real, because Apple was a real company. So anyway, I picked blackberries, which is the fruit, right? I picked those off of a bush and sold them door to door in the summer of 1994 and made $1,500 selling blackberries that summer. And true to his word, my dad matched me. He ended up borrowing the money from my uncle, and we bought $3,000 worth of Apple stock in 1994.
Wow. And do you still have that stock?
No, we did. It would be cool. I did sell it in 2000. So we moved from Georgia to Florida. And when we moved, I asked my dad, just happenstance, like, hey, what's going on with the stock? And we had made like a 400% return, and we sold, he sold that for me, or helped me sell it, and gave me $12,000 as a 12-year-old. I was like, this is it. This is all I want to do forever. And at the time, I think many people will probably recognize this spot in their life. I was at a place where I didn't know anything about, from the age of 12 to like 20, that 8-year span. I was never really taught mentors, right? And I was never really given the insight that you can essentially hire individuals who have been where you want to go and have them help pull you there. Have them give you insights and steps and tips and tricks, and you can shorten your learning curve. I was unaware that that happened. I just figured, learn everything, make tons of mistakes, and you'll figure it out in the end. And wasn't the best way to do it, but
Wow, what a lesson to learn at that age. Like, there's so many people I've interviewed in the past on the podcast that have had stories where they've just got this sense of curiosity about money growing up, and they've then gone on to learn something that's like really shaped how they then behaved around money all into the rest of their lives and their adult lives. And I'm really curious, Jeremy, to So at that age, learning about the concepts of turning something into something else, how did you get into that world then? And who did you learn from when it came to investing decisions?
I was told by my dad at the age of like 13. I asked him, I was like, "Hey man, Pops, what do I need to do with my life?" Right? And he told me, "Study money." That was his advice. Study money. He says, "I'm too old and too poor to figure it out, but you can figure this out." And I'm the baby of 6. So I'm the very, very last child of 6 kids. And I was the only one like, "Go to college. This is your thing. You have to go to college." So I went to get a finance degree, Catherine, because in finance, in college and university, they definitely teach you all about investing and budgeting and the stock market and relationships with money and your subconscious beliefs, right? Obviously.
Obviously.
Duh. Why else would you pay them all this money to go?
I can imagine that on their agenda.
Right. So I did. I went to a very top 10 prestigious school in, the University of Florida to get a finance degree. And as I was going through the classes, I was realizing I wasn't learning anything about money. It was very accounting and economics and things that mattered, but that didn't matter to me, or at least what I wanted. I wanted to learn about the stock market. I want to learn about investing. That was it. So I did end up switching degrees, and I was at work. I worked at a place called Nationwide Insurance. It's this big insurance company. And I had a boss who on his computer screens had what a lot of people, you'll probably know if I say the word stock market images, everyone has an idea of what that looks like. That's what he had on his screen. I had no idea what I was looking at, but I knew it was stock market stuff. So I asked him, "Hey, Rob, what is on your screen? I want to know everything about the stock market." And he was like, "Really?" Because I was late 19 at this time. And he did. He was my first mentor. He was someone who was in a position where he made so much money from the stock market. I actually ended up asking him, "Hey man, how much do you make a month in the markets?" And he said $30,000 every single month. I was like, "Dude, what? What are you talking about? Why do you work here?" And he was like, "I need to get away from my wife." That was his answer, but his other answer was also the insurance is good and it gives me something to do. So anyway, he made so much money from the markets. I mean, $30,000 a month, pretty passively, semi-passively was my new favorite term from you. And once he told me that, that was it. I was hooked. I studied as much information as I could. Here in the US, we have something called a 401k, which is like a work benefit plan. And if you work, you can take your money and you can invest it into the market through this 401k plan. Well, I had that funded and I had been doing that for the last few years. So there was some money in there. I just started learning how to use that instrument as my number one instrument to invest.
So that's pensions over here. And I'm really glad
Yeah.
that you brought that up, because so many people are frightened of pensions because of all the
Mhm.
bad rap that they get in the media.
Mhm.
But for me, pensions are just like a little wrapper, like almost like you got a bowl of sweets, and one of those sweets has got a little wrapper around it, and all that is the pension wrapper, that makes it tax efficient. But this is a great thing, right? Isn't it? Is that most people, if I say to you right now, like, are you investing? Most people listening to this podcast will probably say no, like, I haven't got started. But most of us are already investing by the fact that we are buying things in companies, like we're buying Apple phones. So therefore,
Mhm.
we're kind of investing in those companies, or we are investing through pensions, but we don't perceive that to be investing somehow. We think that that just happens automatically. We don't have any choice. We don't have any options as to where to invest within those wrappers. So I would love to hear from you, Jeremy. Like, what are your top tips to anyone who is intrigued or interested in learning how to invest for themselves, but are maybe a little bit scared of buying one company's stock or investing in maybe some more of the sexy stuff like cryptocurrency in the market? Where would be a really good place for them to get started?
In their brain. So here's the answer really. You have to understand that it's easy. We're told through our whole lives, you have to be very, very smart and very, very rich to understand investing, which is not true. I'm not smart at all. Like my IQ is like maybe 92 at best. At best 92.
Good.
It is when you're talking about investing, we have to understand that getting rich is easy. It's easier not to,
Mm,
but it's very simple to do. Very similar to what you say all the time. You have to start. You got to take a step. It's a bunch of small steps over time that equate to a marathon. And when you're talking about individuals who run extreme far long distances like ultra marathons, 100-mile races, things are just abnormal. It is a frequent step over step over step. And then you'll get to steps that are painful. You'll get to steps that are scary and terrifying, but you have to continue to make them. My number one tip is invest in companies that you know, use, and understand on a daily basis. You mentioned people using Apple iPhones, right? It's a very, very popular device. Tons of people have them all over, literally billions of people have them all over the planet. Well, when you're doing that, you are a consumer, right? You should be an owner, not
mm,
just a consumer. That was what my dad told me when I was super young. Is he said, "Hey, man, Apple computers are coming out, and people are going to buy them and they're going to use them. And the more people that buy these Apple computers, the more money that Apple's going to have, and the more money that Apple has, the higher their stock price is going to go." Boom. That's investing. Use companies that you know, understand, and give your money to anyway. Let's take Netflix, for example. Most of your listeners probably have a Netflix subscription, most likely. And they're spending somewhere between, I have no idea, £10 a month for their Netflix subscription. Well, if that's the case, Netflix is up as far as its stock price 300% over the last 5 years. 300%. It's a huge number. So if you had taken £10 and bought your Netflix subscription, and then the exact same amount, £10, and bought Netflix stock every single month, just like your subscription, the money that you would have in your account would pay for the next 50 years of your Netflix subscription. So now you no longer have to pay for Netflix again because you used the stock to be an owner and not just a consumer.
that's such a good phrase. I've even written that down, like to be an owner, not a consumer, because that's really what investing is, isn't it? Is
Mhm.
investing. This is my kids tell me all the time. I have two boys, 8 and 10, and my youngest one is absolutely fascinated with investing in companies. He's always asking me like a bunch of questions about it. And we always talk about the fact that you want to invest in companies that you support, like that you maybe
Yep.
purchase already, but also ones that you like from an ethical perspective. I always like to like weed out some of the companies that from an ethical perspective don't match my values. So
100%.
for example, pornography companies or tobacco industries or arms manufacturing, you can
Mhm.
invest in ways that actually align to your own personal values. But we always talk about just owning a slice of a company that you're probably already buying products of anyway. So as you said, Jeremy, it makes sense to be investing in those companies so that as those companies grow, you're going to be piggybacking off a slice of that share, a share of that company's growth. But I just think that the people don't really understand what does investing actually really mean. And so I love that explanation there, Jeremy. To
Thank
be an
you.
owner, not a consumer.
Yeah, thank you. You said the word perfectly, share, right? When you own a piece of this company, you are sharing in its profits. You
Mm.
literally buy a share of the company. You are sharing ownership. Another way to think about it is you are buying into a business. You are a business owner when you buy stock in that company. You own part of that business and you don't have to do anything with it. It is passive income. It is semi-passive growth. It is something that you don't have to work for. You have the employees and all the individuals who are doing all the work, and you reap the rewards. Let's use two other companies that I'm sure your listeners are probably pretty familiar with: Starbucks and Lululemon. Both companies are up hundreds of percents in the last 3 to 4 years. And when Lulu came out with, well, I'm sure they've had them for a while, but I'll be honest. When I bought a pair myself for dudes, right? When I was like, all right, I thought they were only girl yoga pants. That's what I thought. And I saw some buddies wear them. I'm like, dude, those are fire. Where'd you get those shorts, bro? He's like, oh, these are Lulu's. I was like, what?
I've actually
So
never heard of Lululemons.
never. Okay, so
No.
they're yoga pants that are both men and women, and they're very high quality. They have a really really long return policy. So it's like if you don't like them for 5 years, like give them back and would you give your money back kind of thing. Like they don't break, they don't cut. But Lululemons, they are specifically, really really amazing clothing wear, and this stock is just screaming. So there's a lot of people who wear the clothes, and so I'm telling them, hey, if you buy Lulu's, buy the stock. If
Mm.
you eat at McDonald's, buy some McDonald's. If you again watch Netflix, buy some shares of Netflix. If you use an Apple, if you use Facebook, if you use Google, if you shop at Amazon, all of these companies can be owned by you, and they should be owned by you because it's smart to buy assets. Assets are sexy.
Yes, assets are sexy. They absolutely are. And so just to come back on that then, Jeremy, so you talked about, first of all, about mindset, like
Yep.
investing is a mindset. And I 100% really believe that that is the first thing to be aware of, is that investing does take the right mindset.
Yep.
And then you talked about investing in stocks or companies that you're already familiar with. And then you talked about becoming an owner, not a consumer. How would somebody go about choosing where to go and buy those stocks?
Oh, that's a great question. So you mentioned the pensions. If individuals work, you can, and in all transparency, it probably takes 5 minutes of your time. You can probably go in and find out what your pension is buying for you. And
Mm.
you'll be surprised. You'll know the majority of those companies. It'll probably be Microsoft, Facebook, British Petroleum, um, Unilever. I mean, some other larger companies that are all, Hershey's. They'll list out the stocks that you're investing in through whatever potential program you have. Let's say you have a program that you're investing into your pension called the Retirement of 2040 Fund or whatever. You can go into that fund and actually see what stocks you're buying. So one thing you can do is, if you have a pension and they are allowing you to put money in there as to invest from your paycheck directly, do that for sure. Secondly, the tools and resources are abundant and they're very, very easy to find. It's extremely similar to where do you go get your drinks after work, or where do you go get your coffee? There are so many places. Some of them are good, some are great, but there's very, very few that are like, this place is just awful. Do not go here. It's terrible when it comes to investing. I'm sure there are some, but the biggest company that I'm sure everyone here who is listening would be able to access is called Interactive Brokers. I actually do have a franchise in the UK. It's called Real Life Trading UK. And we focus on teaching people who live in the UK area or all of England and all that whole space how to pick what's called brokers. And Interactive Brokers is an opportunity for anyone who has money to use that money to invest into stocks directly. They don't need a middleman. It's just you and the markets.
Yeah, and that's a great place to get started. I think looking at where your money's already invested is a great
Mhm.
place to start. Often with pensions, like until you dig like into it, you won't necessarily know the stocks,
Right.
because what often happens is they'll tell you like you're invested in the balanced managed funds, for example, and you're like, what the hell is
Yes.
a balanced managed fund? And what you have to do is go and find the fund fact sheets for each of those funds that you're invested in. And then that will give you the breakdown of geographically where it's invested. It might give
Correct.
you the top 10 holdings of where you're invested. But even just to bring some curiosity to, well, where is my money invested? Is that where you want your money invested? But also then let's talk just for a second, Jeremy, about risk, because
Mhm.
people will always already be thinking like, well, that's all well and good talking about investing, but like, what are the risks involved with investing my money into stocks? So for someone who's new onto that journey, how would you describe risk in terms of investing risks?
I'm gonna give you 2 answers, and the first one is gonna be very mathematical, and then the second one's gonna be more philosophical. So the first one, there is a mathematical formula that you can use, which is second grade math to determine and calculate risk, and it's really, really easy. Let's say specifically, if you buy 1,000 shares of any company on earth and that stock goes up $1, you make $1,000 or 1,000 pounds, right? That's it. That's the math. Like if you buy 1,000 of anything units and it goes up 10, you make 10,000 pounds or $10,000. If you buy 1,000 of anything that goes up 100, you create 100,000 pounds or dollars of wealth when that happens, when that move occurs. So the math behind it is you can create what's called a risk unit. You can have a very measurable form of risk when you invest so that you know if the trade does not work, you can invest 100,000 pounds into a particular trade and only lose 1,000 pounds if you're not right. So you lose 1% of your investment if you are incorrect on that trade or on that investment or on that position. Obviously, that's really great to know, right? You can mitigate risk on anything easily in the markets because they're very liquid, they're very, very safe, right? If the market's going down, you can get out. You can, they're so liquid. That's what's phenomenal about them is if you don't like it, get out. Take
Or stay in, I guess, is the other thing. Like
exactly
just time is a risk mitigator in itself, isn't it? Because
100%.
if the market goes down, that share goes down. We just wait for it to come back up again.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that phrase, time is a great risk mitigator, because when you're talking about the risks of investing, so my second answer was gonna be more philosophical. What's the risks of walking outside or getting into your car, right? Or drinking or doing like those risks far exceed the risks of investing. I mean, if you're gonna ride your bicycle down the road, you literally have like a 9% chance of dying by getting hit by a car.
Is that
Like,
right?
it's a crazy huge number. It's insane. Like a 9% chance. I mean, if you're investing into the market, what's the chance that you lose all of your money? Like 0.0000001%. Like it's there, but it's so small. I mean, the whole global economy would have to entirely collapse overnight for you to lose all of your money, especially if it's in a balanced portfolio or some type of blended diversification of some kind. Something tragic would have to happen, like a zombie apocalypse is more likely than all the markets across the world going to zero. And if a zombie apocalypse does happen, everything's gonna be at zero anyway. So yeah, you should invest. The risk is if you don't, you will be poor. That's the risk. So don't be poor, invest.
Yeah, I love that just appreciation of the fact that, if you're invested in one company and that one company goes belly up, then yes, your money's at risk. But if you're
Mhm.
spreading everything and you've got, some shares in different companies, not just in the UK, but globally,
Mhm.
that's how you can start to reduce risk. And then also holding those stocks for longer periods of time. If you
Yep.
look at the data, there's so much great data actually. There's a website I always point people towards, which is called Boring Money in the UK. And they do heaps of research around the fact that how you can mitigate risk of just remaining investing.
Mhm.
And that's a mindset as well, isn't it? Because a lot of the time when the markets crash, people fear that they're going to lose their money. So they pull money out when the markets are going down because they're worried or concerned about losing money. And that, again, going back to the behaviors and the mindset, that, sometimes it is about investing and sticking and not necessarily feeling like you have to be trading all the time. Trading is one
Mhm.
way to do it, and definitely like the sexy way, I think, of investing. But I also think that we can invest very broadly, very vanilla-y. I don't even think that's a word.
I like it
Like
though. I'm gonna take it.
basic investment strategies.
Yep.
And then you can have some fun with, money that you can have a little bit more of a play with.
You're spot on, 100%. And the key is to continually doing it. I heard from a very, very wise person not too long ago, one of the best skills you can have is consistency. So if you have a consistent approach where, let's say, for example, you make let's say you make $100 a week. I'm just going to use easy numbers, but you make 100 of anything a week. If you take 20 to 30% of that and invest it into an asset or assets of some kind every single week without fail, you will grow wealth. Guaranteed. It happens. It's just, it has to happen, because the more you do it, when you consistently do something over time, it compounds. And
Yeah.
as long as you're continually, consistently just dripping on that investment, adding to it weekly or monthly or quarterly or yearly, if you don't stop, you will have an amazing, amazing future ahead of you.
Amazing. I love that, Jeremy. And just to finish there, I talked at the very start about one of the things that can stop people from investing is the mindset.
Mhm.
We talk very much about mindset on this podcast.
Mhm.
And I'm really curious to know your opinion on where do you see the differences between people that are stuck in fear and people that are stuck in fear of greed, i.e., investing is just for people that are greedy.
My favorite thing to talk about, because you've obviously, I'm sure many of your listeners have heard the term, the markets are controlled by fear and greed. And when we're talking about subconscious barriers, which I know you do, and that's your main focus, is the mindset piece. If someone thinks, either consciously, but generally it's subconsciously, that investing will eventually lead to them becoming greedy, they're not going to do it. Or if they do it, they won't do it well, because no inherent person wants to become greedy. But here's my back end question of that. Are people actually greedy? And the answer is absolutely. Some people are. Very, very few. An incredibly tiny populace of individuals who invest are greedy, because greed is a state of the soul. It's a state of the soul that can never be quenched ever with any amount of money whatsoever. So if you were sitting there listening to this podcast and you think to yourself, wow, if I had £1,000,000 or $1,000,000, I would give some away to charity. I would give some away to my kids. I would go and travel. I would tip generously. I would do this. I would do this. I would do this. As you start to think about what you would do with the money, you are not greedy by any stretch of the nature. In fact, it's literally the exact opposite of greed if you're going to give any of your money away to anyone ever at any point for any reason.
Mm.
Greed is, I'm keeping it all to myself, everyone else. This is all mine, right? No one else can have it. That is greed. So I personally think the markets are controlled by fear and optimism. Fear is a piece of it, but it's not greed. Fear is just, you don't know anything. You're uneducated. That's what fear comes from. Once you are educated and you know how to calculate risk and you understand how to do it and you understand how to apply very, very basic, simple, easy strategies that anyone can use. Once you can spend, I don't know, 4 hours a year understanding this information, reading some books, going through classes, going through a webinar or two, you no longer have fear because now you're educated. The vast populace of the world is uneducated when it comes to liquid markets, because we are taught that they are hard, complex instruments that only rich, smart people can obtain. And like I mentioned, that's just not true at all.
Yeah, I love that. And you know, as you were talking there, I often come up with these like really deep psychological like discussions internally in my head when I interview guests. It really gets me thinking. And I actually wonder whether fear drives greed, because greed for ourselves could be that we feel fearful that we're going to run out of money. And so we get greedy to hoarding money and not investing it, or greedy to hoarding money and not sharing it with people that we love or causes that we support because we're fearful that it's going to run out. I actually think that fear is the biggest block to stopping people getting investing. I think one fuels the other. What are your thoughts on that?
100% agree. Absolutely. Fear is false evidence appearing real. And or you can say face everything and rise. Right? Which one controls you?
Oh, I've not heard that one before. I like
Yeah.
that.
Thank you. So which one controls you when you're thinking of the fear aspect? We are afraid of the unknown as humans, because 500 years ago, If we ate the wrong berry, we died. If we went to the wrong bush, we died. If we fell from a tree, we died. If we broke our ankle, it's game over. Fear is baked into our genomes, our DNA, our subconscious as humans, because we are animals, mammals, and creatures, right? We have to survive. And if we don't, we die. And so that internal brain composition of staying alive is, I mean, thankfully incredible, but also it keeps us from making extremely what we would deem as risky decisions. But that fear gets removed through, in my opinion, proper education, mentorships, podcasts, just like this one, books, experiences, webinars, seminars, live events, pouring both time and money into something. That's how fear is removed, because you have to spend one of those two things, time or money. If you can show me something that doesn't require time or money, please let me know. I will buy all of it. Like, time or money is required. And once you use time and money, right, money being your least valuable asset, and you spend your least valuable asset to gain time, your most valuable asset, as you start doing that more and more and more, fear 100% gets removed through those decisions and your course of actions that you take.
I love that. And what a lovely way to finish the podcast. Like, I'd love for anyone listening to this today, just send me a DM on Instagram, Catherine Morgan Money, and let me know, like, what is the one step that you want to take towards investing for yourself for 2022? Let me know. Just DM me your comment. What have you learned from this episode today? And I'll share those with Jeremy as well. And Jeremy, for those of you who would love to learn more about your podcast or come, where would be the best place for them to come and find you?
Thank you, Catherine. Yes, the best place to track me down, you can absolutely go to broketowoke.com, and you'll hear my entire story along with my business partner, Brittany Turner. You can also find me on my main website, which is reallifetrading.com, if anybody does want to educate themselves more on financial markets. But I'm all over social media. So if you type in my name, I'm sure you'll track me down.
Amazing. And you're obviously listening to this because you love podcasts. So go check out the podcast Broke to Woke as well. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Jeremy. You're a legend. Have a great week. And I'll see all of you guys soon.